You carry it around with you almost everywhere you go. You have one of the most astounding tools that exist on the planet, and it's your brain. We've all got one. You have it with you, right? And most days, it's serving you pretty well. You're able to solve complex problems, learn languages, use structures and frameworks, recognize faces. And there are days when it seems our brain is out to get us. We make assumptions. We get stuck in one perspective. We travel the same pathways over and over. Yeah? We get really, really stuck. And I'm sure it never happens to you, but you know some of these people, right? So this brain is fascinating. And one of the things we've really learned about it is we have the ability to use it much more effectively. Much more effectively. So I want to share with you today some ways that we can do that we can flip some switches to be high-performing creatures consistently. So those two switches we're going to talk about. Number one, learning to think about what we're thinking about. Sounds a little strange, doesn't it? It's actually very powerful. And the second switch is to get crystal clear on winning. Winning with specificity for you, your team, your organization. So you push some of the instinctual buttons in yourself that I'll share with you today. I'm Holly G. Green, and I am fascinated with the way this brain of ours works. And I have the pleasure of working with elite players around the globe. So I work with our United States Navy SEALs, Top Gun fighter pilots, Olympic athletes, for-profit and not-for-profit organizations that are unquestionably the very best at what they do. I'm the author of numerous books, including Using Your Brain to Win. I'm a behavioral scientist. I have a BA in BS. It's true. It's probably not what you're thinking, though. I have a Master's of Science degree in Organization Development. My postgraduate studies are in neurophysiology. How and why do you think and behave the way that you do at work each day? And how and why do those other strange people you work with think and behave the way that they do? And I get to work with clients, everyone from Google to pest control, from McKesson to manufacturing. It doesn't really matter as long as there are adult humans involved. And what I've learned from this insider perspective is how the elite activate their brains a little differently than we typically do at work each day. Now, you and I are not going to be a United States Navy SEAL. I'm sorry if I've destroyed anyone's dream here today, but we're probably not going to be. But we do have the most crucial tool that they use in what they do every day, that brain of ours. And we can tap into its powers in a nanosecond. So let's talk a little more about the science of the brain. It is evolving and dynamic, constantly changing. We are unlearning almost as much as we're learning about the brain these days. Very, very important to keep that in mind. So one of the things we've continued to validate about this brain of ours is that it likes what it already knows. You tend to travel in what we call a comfort corridor. You stick to very well-worn pathways, doing the same things over and over again, expecting those different results. We drive the same way, we eat the same foods, we listen to the same music. Make sense? You've heard about this with friends of friends, yeah? So this comfort corridor brings us exactly that, a sense of comfort. Our brain digs what it is already familiar with, even when it's not working so well for us. So we've really got to think about the brain of ours a little differently. So let's go hardcore science here for just a moment. You have about 100 billion neurons in your brain. It's a lot of those suckers in there. And here's what's going on. When you're thinking and doing, a synapsis occurs between the neurons. That synapses is either chemical or it's electrical. And when that synapsis occurs, it's like a microscopic thread is pulled between the two neurons. That thread is called myelin. The more you think and do the same thing over and over, the thicker that thread, if you will, gets. That's called myelin sheathing or myelin wiring. The thicker the thread, the more you do the same things over and over. It served us incredibly well when the world was fairly stable. We could do the same things, get our gold watch after 50 years. It was good. The problem is we are in a hyper-paced world where everything is changing continuously. And that pathway that got us here is not the pathway that's going to get us to the next place. This comfort corridor and elite performance don't play well together. It is the antithesis of what we see high performers do. High performers are continuously creating new neural pathways. They're changing perspective, challenging assumptions, doing things different to achieve higher and higher levels constantly. So let's talk about how we get to our decisions a little bit in that brain, how we travel these pathways. Because the more we understand this, the more we have the ability to pause. And while we're pausing, to think a little differently. We start with data, just like a video would record it. During every waking moment, you are bombarded with tens of thousands of bits and bytes of data. Everything from the fabric, the color, the lighting in the room, the feel of the cloth against your skin, the temperature, lots of stuff. Now you screen in a small percentage of this data, much smaller than you might expect. And your data and your data and your data are highly likely to be a slightly different 10% or so. But we're sure of it. Once our brain's got the data, it becomes the data to our brain. Not a slice of. It becomes the truth. And we jump. In a microsecond now we add meaning to our data. And again, that meaning differs by each and every one of us. And then we make assumptions. And we all know about assumptions, yeah? And then we draw conclusions, which form beliefs about our world, about how things work, how others do, etc. And then we behave. And all of this takes a second or two to trigger you from the moment you select data until I see your behavior. So I used to work for a global organization. My experiences include senior level roles in the Coca-Cola Company, Dell Computer, AT&T, a few you might have heard of. And in one of my roles with that organization, I traveled about 60% of the time outside the US. On one of my trips, I had an armed bodyguard, an armored car, and an armed driver. I was in an area that we just needed that at the time. And we're driving to the meetings, and we're running a little late. And so suddenly there are police lights in the rearview mirror. What does my driver do? He speeds up. He punches it. Right? Now imagine the disconnect in my brain. Because I'm in the back seat, I can see the lights flashing, I can hear the siren blaring, and my driver goes faster. Now, although I was born outside the United States, and since that particular incident, I have been kidnapped 2 times in other countries. And once it was by the police in another nation. Like Liam never showed up for me. I'm just saying. Yeah. Up until that point, however, police meant authority figure. You do what you're supposed to do, which is, of course, slow down and pull over. So let's just imagine you're driving here to this conference today, and there's a police car behind you, lights flashing, siren blaring. What do? You slow down and you pull over. Or you take a breath and hope they get the next poor sucker, right? So, and let's say you saw me do that as well. And the problem is, you would believe that I think the way you think, but I don't. Because what's going on inside my head in that particular scenario is, where am I? What are the norms here? Is it well marked, well lit? Does it seem safe? Are there a lot of other people around? Where am I? Now, how long do you think it takes me to think that? A few seconds, right? And let's say I'm here, it's a beautiful day, it's a well-marked vehicle, there are people around. You see me slow down and pull over. And the mistake you make is to believe that I think the same way you do. Now let's just translate this into work behaviors for a moment. How many of you have ever had to go to one of those meetings thingies? Who's ever had to do that? Yes, of course, we all do. Way too many of them, yes? And when you're in a meeting, do people nod their head? And you think it means they agree, right? And they understand exactly what you're talking about, right? Yeah. Have you ever been in a meeting and everyone did that and then they walked out and they all did something different and you thought, wait a minute, I thought we were all in the same meeting. This is going on constantly. We are running up what is called a ladder of inference, making decisions and behaving. And the problem is, on almost every day, we're assuming you think the way I think. It's obvious you were there. We have the same data. Now, go back if you think about for just a moment, what triggers our process of behavior is the selection of data. How does our brain know? How does our brain know what to screen in and what to screen out? Because it's pretty important. It leads us to whatever it is we do. Well, it's interesting. You have assumptions, biases, opinions, stereotypes, training, what your parents taught you, where you grew up, where you went to school, all sorts of what we call bubbles in your brain. And these bubbles are the pairs of glasses through which you view the world. And it's amazing how much we screen out when we're completely unaware of why we screened in. So thinking about what we're thinking about requires us to slow down enough and ponder for just a moment, what data do I have? Could there be other data? Could there be something different? Could someone else take this same data and it means something different to them? What if? What if? Now, I'm not talking about doing omphalet skepsis here, which, by the way, is a word you should write down. It's really cool. It's going to wow your family and friends. All it really means is the art of staring at your navel. And you don't need to slow down that much. We're talking about inserting a few seconds every now and then to think about what you're thinking about. Because you are better at proving yourself right than any single thing you do as an adult human. You are constantly doing it. Don't you think? Isn't it true? Shouldn't we? It's obvious that. There's no question we're great at proving ourselves right. You're going to hear this a lot now as you go into meetings and conversations with people. And you'll think, oh, you're proving yourself right. What if? What if? That singular pausing 2 or 3 seconds every now and then is insanely powerful to creating a few new neural connections every now and then. Now, in addition to this proving ourselves right, there's sort of the flip side of the coin here, and it's the other cool word you're going to want to write down. Neuroplasticity. You have a lot of it. And that simply defined means that until you're either dead or your brain is diseased, you can thunk new thunks. You have the ability to create whole new pathways in your brain. But it requires you visit. It requires you slow down just enough and prompt your brain to create some new connections. This neuroplasticity is one of the key ingredients we see in high performers. The ability to think a new way, to ponder a new option, to explore a possibility, and to look at alternatives. Your brain is absolutely fascinating. And you can do this. What if questioning, taking a breath, pondering, slowing down, because your today brain is not your always brain. Unless you let it be. You have the ability to be a higher performer than you are today. It's about 3 pounds that you're carrying around with you. You might as well visit. It loves when you visit, by the way. Visiting your brain and pondering options, possibilities, and alternatives gives you energy. It gives you energy. Now, how many of you think you don't have enough time today? Yeah? You're all running around. We're really busy. And whether we have our to-do list written down or in our head, we've got this belief of busyness. Busyness is not a belief in the elite brain. Slowing down, taking a breath, pausing, pondering, wondering, trying it a new way. That's what elite performers do. So every single morning, after you get up, don't check your phone in bed, by the way. After you get up, ask yourself, of what I do today, what will move me, my team, my organization the most towards winning? What do I need to focus on? Because that becomes the filter to screen in or screen out what you should see, need to see, and can see to be even more incredible than you already are. Thank you for letting me play with your brains for a moment this afternoon.